guitar fretboard is a mysterious thing. You can play the guitar for years and not understand it. The diatonic system, which gives us the structure of the musical keys, scales, chords, etc., becomes an invisible maze on the fretboard. How do we imagine a diatonic key on this grid of strings and frets? What is the true shape of the key of C, or D, or E flat? Since the fretboard is a grid, it makes sense that there should be a standard map of the positions of the notes based on some relevant criteria, turning important note groups into memorable landmarks like landmasses in the ocean or constellations in the night sky. You are looking at a map of the natural tones on the guitar fretboard. These are the notes of the key of C. The colors and shapes group the notes based on their navigational characteristics. For instance, the yellow vertical bars show where the notes align in specific fret positions. The blue ovals and semi-ovals comprise all the half steps within the key. The two boomerang shapes are the notes A, D, and G, which are not connected to any of the other landmarks. Notice that they are each preceded and followed by whole steps. This is a staff, and this is a clef, and these are the notes of the key of C. The notes in alphabetical order can play a scale, which can be represented by Roman numerals we call key degrees. Between each note is an interval of a whole step or a half step in a particular pattern. 2 whole steps followed by a half step for the first 4 notes, and the same pattern again for the next group of 4. These 4-note groupings are known as tetrachords. Notice the whole step in the middle between the 2 tetrachords. You can easily locate the half steps on the piano. If you know where the tetrachords are, everything falls into place. Logical as the structure of the diatonic system seems on the piano, on the guitar, that structure, that symmetry, that logic seems to have disappeared. Unlike the simple repetitive black and white piano keyboard pattern, the notes of the black and white keys seem at first almost random on the guitar fretboard. Yet the tetrachords are still there, if you know how to find them. To do that, we need reference points, landmarks. The open strings, the 5th fret and the 10th fret become axis positions where notes of the key of C line up. The 11th fret has no notes belonging to the key, and the 12th fret begins the system again. We'll name each axis for its associated mode, Phrygian, Aeolian, and Dorian. There's a perfect 4th between these axes. The same interval we get between the lowest and highest notes of each tetrachord. The half steps form their own pattern. Then all we have left are 2 instances of the notes A, D, and G, and a lone G. Middle C cuts a diagonal path across the board. Likewise, C an octave below and above. If we think of the notes on the fretboard starting from the center rather than from the open strings, the symmetry becomes clearer and clearer. Separating the pattern of the 4 top strings and the 3 bottom strings shows the multiple layers of symmetry. All of this applies to every key. When we swap alphabetical notes for Roman numerals, we have a fixed geometric and diatonic symmetry of note positions from one key to the next, and the next, and the next. Like constellations in the night sky, the patterns shift with the seasons. In the key of G, we find the void position has moved from the 11th fret to the 6th fret and is now at the center of the symmetry. And so we go from key to key, aware of the common landmarks in each, able to really see the notes on the fretboard. And we can describe the structure of each diatonic key in geographic terms. Half-step clusters, axis frets, etc. These are all regions on the terrain of the guitar fretboard. What you've just seen is a way of mapping the diatonic keys on the fingerboard in a way that does not require specific chord patterns or specific scales, but simply to see and understand keys on their own terms. Without having a name for the phenomenon of the notes of a key aligning in a specific fret position, how can you think about that idea? Say we're in the key of G, on the 5th fret, on the 7th fret, the 12th fret, and the open strings. Those are positions where the notes of the key of G align. Now, there is apparently no standard terminology for that phenomenon. So I have taken to calling those things axis positions or axes for each key, and I name them after the modes associated with that position in the key, just because it's a convenient way to give them names. So for instance, if we're in the key of G, there's an axis on A, which is the 2 of the key of G, and so therefore it is the Dorian axis. There is an axis on the 7th fret on B, which is the 3 of the key of G, and so therefore that is the Phrygian axis. And there is an axis in the open strings and the 12th fret, which is the 6 of the key of G, and therefore that is the Aeolian axis. So the Aeolian axis, the Dorian axis, and the Phrygian axis are common to every key. Once again, to my knowledge, there is no standard terminology for this, and so this is my proposal, and this is what works for me. Having a vocabulary, having terminology that describes where things are relative to each other within the key is, I find, a highly useful method of organizing how I think about a song or any piece of music. There are certain patterns which become building blocks, really essential structural elements in any piece of music. What is the terminology of the architecture for the way the key is arranged on the fingerboard? This is something that's missing. I've
been looking for it. I started looking for it a long time ago, and I could not find it. I mean, I started looking for this before there was an internet, and I couldn't find it. And I thought, the internet will save me, because I will have access to all of the literature about how to find your way around the guitar fingerboard, and I could not find it even then. And I was teaching guitar, and I started to think about my method of how I taught guitar, and I thought, I can't teach properly if I'm not satisfied with my own understanding of the way this works. And in order for me to be satisfied with my understanding of the way this works, I had to kind of go back and forth between the guitar and the piano. And that's because I also play piano. And improvising on the piano is very different from improvising on the guitar. You improvise on the piano, you see everything all in a row. It's all there in a row, and there's one place for every note. And there's a logic to that, very clear logic to that. Well, there's a logic to this too, because it's the same musical system. You can't take this logical musical system, the diatonic system is very logical. It's very organized. And you cannot take that organized system from the piano keyboard, where it is obvious how clear and simple it is, and put it on the guitar fingerboard and say all of that logic has evaporated. All of that structure has no expression on this grid. Well, it's a grid. It's X and Y axis. It's coordinates. And maybe the system is encrypted in a way that you have to know how to decrypt that system, but it's there. And so that's what I started doing. I started thinking of it that way, and I thought, okay, I'm going to decrypt the diatonic system on the fingerboard, and I'm going to see it in the clearest possible way. And that came down to knowing where the half steps are and knowing where the notes line up in the key. I'm in the key of G now. So I created these maps, I started using them, and it just worked for me. It all fits together like a puzzle. If you have that map of the fingerboard in your mind, and you have names for these structures, it can only be a good thing. It can only be a good thing. All right? So it works for me. That's what I do. That's how I think about it. And that's what I teach. And when I introduce these ideas to a student, it doesn't matter if they're a total beginner or if they've been playing for a long time and just want to know a little more about how to find their way around the fingerboard because they've just been relying on muscle memory and kind of rote memorization of a few scales and chords. Anyone at any level can develop an understanding of the map of the fingerboard. You will find plenty of information regarding this method on my blog, photography.blogspot.com. And I will be doing a special post on the blog pertaining to this precise video, and more to come, to be continued. All right, thank you.